Hello, first graders. Today I'm going to read to you Riptide. Zachary lived in a Cape Cod house which had pine woods for a comforter and shingles bleached to driftwood by the sea. It was only a salt marsh and 3 sand dunes from the great ocean beach, but a long way from the village, so Zachary wished he had a dog for company. A cuddly pup that licked was what he wanted. His father brought a golden ball of fur, as warm and soft as Zachary's dream. "He needs a hug," Zach's father said, "and then he needs a name." They called him Rip, Riptide Windjammer. Not Scout or Pal or any of the plain old names for dogs they knew. Riptide for a current that runs out to sea when sandbars crumble. Windjammer for a ship that runs before the wind. They didn't know he'd live up to his name. They didn't know the sea would call to Rip, as it calls to fishermen and sailors, surfers and sunbathers. The ocean always drummed Pied Piper songs for Zach's dog, Rip. For just one summer, Riptide followed Zach's small surfboard and leaned the tricky waves of current racing round the sandbars. But by September, he was off on business of his own. All day he'd run for miles along the beach and then swim back as many miles to where the path for home began. "He wants to be a dolphin," Zachary's father said. "See how he dives into a long-haired wave, comes up, and dives again?" But Zachary thought, Rip wants to be the wind. He's like the wind, the way he races down the shore and rides the sea. Zach still wished Rip would lick and guard the apple stand in the fall and chase his wiffle balls in the spring. Instead, year-round, Riptide patrolled the beach, even when ice piled up along the sand and only huddled gulls were there to see him running by. And worst of all was summer, when Rip wanted more than running, free to be a picnicker, a surfer, even a lifeguard, herding toddlers in the shallows just like a sheepdog with new lambs. Rip couldn't read the big clear sign that said, "No dogs on Nauset Beach." So when the beach patrol went after him with whistles and their walkie-talkies, Rip thought they surely must be some mistake. At first, he simply paid them no attention, and then he learned a dozen new escapes. The gray-haired tower of a man who wore a badge and nameplate, Nick, had eyes that swept the beach and didn't miss a thing. "I'll chase that rascal from here to Halifax if I have to," Zach heard him tell the lifeguards. Rip wasn't very old when Zach was called one day to fetch him and found him giving a small boy a ride. The child let Rip's tail go and splashed toward deeper water. Rip spun and leaped beyond him, barking warnings. "You hear that ruckus, son?" Nick frowned at Zachary. "Your Riptide seems to think he has to guard this beach. We've 18 guards already. Keep him home." And so they tried. Zach's father took him to the barber shop, where a conversation crackled, and there were pats aplenty. But Rip looked bored and moaned beside the door. Zach and his mother popped Rip in their truck and drove to Halifax for corn and let the wind whip his ears out like flags. "He's just pretending it's the beach," thought Zachary. No sooner was the corn heaped on the stand than Rip was gone again. There never was a doubt the beach was where they'd find him. The phone calls kept repeating, "Come get Rip!" And on the beach, Rip led his chasers first one way and then another. He swam and ran and mooched and ran and made friends and ran. When chasers came too close, he swam to sea and down the beach for home. Just like the wind, he never could be caught. As summer followed summer, Nick seemed to watch Rip with a growing twinkle in his eyes, and everyone began to feel that Rip belonged. Then came an August day when Zachary headed for the beach. The week's first sunshine warmed the footbridge through the marsh. Zach's bare feet thudded on boards. Boom, boom, echoed the waves, still drumming from a storm. Somewhere far off, a gull or siren cried. Zach wondered where Rip was this shiny day. And then a flock of sirens wailed beyond the dunes, and Zach began to run. The beach was not its usual merry sprawl. Tense knots of people hovered at the water's edge. Lifeguards charged through the surf with ropes and boards and buoys to reach a chain of swimmers drifting out to sea. It was a real riptide, caused by the passing storm. And where was Rip? Zach spied him standing at attention, gazing out to the sea. Then Riptide ran down the dune and bolted for an open stretch of swells. "No, Rip!" yelled Zachary. "Come back!" Instead, Rip burst into the water, battling waves that buried him and tried to drive him back. Riptide, Windjammer, had a mission of his own. Beyond him, Zachary saw a single head. Rip circled, and two hands that beckoned reached to grab his tail. Zachary stood breathless at the water's edge, and Rip, towing the girl behind him, swam for shore the way he always did, with no mistake. Zach sloshed in ankle deep, but Nick waded out beyond him and snatched up the girl before a wave curl caught her. "It seems," he called to Zachary as he carried her to shore, "your rascal Rip has saved a life." But then a waterfall of waves cascaded down on Rip. He clawed for footing in the shallows, but backwash dragged him out into the undertow. "Oh no," Zach yelled. "He's sliding towards the Rip. Can't someone get him?" It seemed Rip paddled with a purpose, but he was being carried out to sea, for as he stuck the sea-bound current, he sailed out still faster, like a gull upon the wind. "Turn!" Zach shouted. But Rip sailed out till Zach could barely tell his dog from sky and water. "He doesn't seem scared," murmured Zach. "That's his world," Nick said, and swinging up his binoculars, he gave a cheer. "Oh, right! He's veering, swimming down the beach!" Then, pushing back his cap, Nick chuckled and shook his head. "Looks like he really is my 19th guard," he said. So, for the 1000th time, Rip swam for home. Zach strained to watch him in the dazzle of the sea. Then Zach began to run. He'd meet Rip down the beach and walk him home. The beach patrol never chased Rip again. The lifeguards let him join their drills, and as he aged, they drove him home for supper, and Zachary was content when Rip dug canyons at the ocean's edge, ran wind sprints with the guards, and rode out to the end of land in Nick's old Jeep. For now, Zach knew what Rip had always known. Rip was the 19th guard. As restless and as constant as the wind, his place was on the beach. There wouldn't ever be another like him. And that is the end. I love this story, and I hope you guys loved it just as much as I do.